Let me be direct with you from the outset. What we are witnessing is not a temporary disruption in the digital landscape of the Middle East. It is not, as the mainstream media continues to repeat, a mere collection of sophisticated hacking attempts or a technical glitch. What we are witnessing is the total collapse of the digital command architecture upon which Israeli security operations have relied for decades. What I am about to show you is a systemic, synchronized neutralization of 1,500 command and control centers that has left the political and military establishment in Tel Aviv in a state of absolute, unprecedented blackout. I am looking at detailed diagnostic reports from regional cybersecurity intelligence firms that have been circulating among international digital warfare analysts for the past 72 hours. And I need you to look at these implications with me because what they reveal is not a series of scattered breaches. It is not an isolated event caused by a single group of actors. It is not a cyber demonstration of force. What it shows is a comprehensive, multi-layered penetration that has rendered the most advanced surveillance and response networks in the Levant effectively invisible to their own operators. We are talking about the deliberate, systematic disabling of over 1,500 nodes that govern intelligence processing, drone coordination, and rapid response logistical command. The sheer scale of this operation is not just significant, it is historically unprecedented. It confirms that the paradigm of digital warfare has shifted entirely away from the Western-centric model of defense. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this blackout was not only possible but inevitable, why the implications for regional hegemony are catastrophic for the current administration in Tel Aviv, and why the silence coming from major news outlets is not an accident. It is a calculated attempt to mask a strategic defeat. This is the analysis you need to understand the true trajectory of this conflict. If you are watching this and realizing that you are not getting this level of depth anywhere else, subscribe now. We are breaking down the data, the architecture, and the reality that most people don't even realize is unfolding right now. Let's start with the technical reality of these command centers because it is the only way to understand why this matters so profoundly. Most observers focus on the kinetic aspect of the conflict, the missiles, the drones, the infantry, but in 2026, those are merely the final actuators. The true battlefield is the data layer that coordinates them. We are talking about fiber optic interconnections, satellite uplink hubs, and the specific localized server farms that process real-time telemetry for the entire security apparatus. The average latency in these Israeli command centers was historically measured in milliseconds. To put that in perspective, the operational capability of a modern drone fleet or an intelligence-driven strike team is entirely dependent on that speed. When you introduce a systemic blackout of 1,500 centers, you don't just slow them down, you blind them. This means the entire decision-making loop, the observe, orient, decide, act cycle, has been completely severed. According to independent monitoring reports from cybersecurity consortiums in Eurasia, the intrusion was detected at approximately 300 local time, yet the cascading failure across all 1,500 nodes took less than 45 minutes to achieve total saturation. Major figures in regional defense studies have stated publicly that this level of synchronization suggests a level of access and preparation that has been years in the making. This is not a reaction to a recent policy. It is the culmination of a long-term strategic investment. Stay with me, because if you think this is just about some downed websites, you are missing the entire point of what has just occurred. Now let's talk about the specific reality of how this wall was breached. Announcement number 1, the systemic nature of the penetration. And this one matters more than anything else happening in this theater right now because it demonstrates that the Iranian and allied digital intelligence agencies were already inside the perimeter months, perhaps years, before the first switch was flipped. They didn't just break in, they occupied the infrastructure. When you look at the technical specifications of these command centers, they were designed with what was considered military-grade, multi-factor, air-gapped protection. But these reports confirm that the attackers didn't need to break the wall. They were already part of the system's own communication protocols. They used the very updates and patch management systems designed to keep the network secure to distribute the payload. According to intelligence summaries from multiple regional analysts and confirmed by sources familiar with the internal investigation within the Israeli Ministry of Defense, the payload was triggered simultaneously across the entire grid. This was not a ripple effect. It was a single command-initiated total blackout. The acknowledgement from internal security officials that they lost control of 1,500 command hubs isn't just an admission of failure, it is an admission of complete structural vulnerability. They are currently operating on manual backups that are, by design, not capable of handling the volume of intelligence required to conduct modern military operations. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the physical consequences of this digital void. This is the part that even the most stubborn observers are finding impossible to ignore. Because the command centers are offline, the coordination between the aerial defense systems and the ground-based tracking stations has collapsed. You see, modern defense is not about individual batteries firing at targets. It is about a shared, integrated digital picture. When you take out 1,500 centers, you don't just take out computers. You take out the ability to identify a target as friend or foe. This has led to a state of total paralysis in the chain of command. We are talking about the inability to track logistics, the failure of communication between units in the field, and the total abandonment of the digital surveillance grid that maintained order in the occupied territories and along the border zones. Stay with me here, because this is where the narrative completely changes. Many of you are asking, why hasn't there been a massive counterstrike? The answer is simple. They cannot coordinate one. To launch a strike, you need a picture of the battlefield. That picture is gone. The silence from the military command in Tel Aviv is not a tactical pause. It is a forced silence born from the realization that their central nervous system has been cut off. They are essentially blind and deaf in the face of any potential response. Announcement number 3, and this is the one that the mainstream media is absolutely terrified of admitting. This wasn't just a defensive act, it was a demonstration of a new, multipolar digital capability. For years, the narrative has been that the West, and Israel specifically, owns the digital space, that they are the innovators and the masters of cyber dominance. Today, that narrative is dead. What we have seen is a transition where the ability to hold a nation's infrastructure hostage has shifted to the forces that the West has attempted to isolate for decades. The reason this outcome is so critical is that it removes the fear factor. If a smaller, technologically underestimated state can disable 1,500 command centers in one synchronized move, what does that mean for the naval fleets in the Mediterranean or the air bases in the region? The math has changed. It is no longer about who has more missiles, it is about who can keep their eyes open in the digital dark. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the polished headlines, because there are two stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering the one that allows them to maintain the status quo. They will tell you this is about state-sponsored actors or clandestine hacking groups. They will use vague language to describe a very precise event. When an Israeli official responds by calling this a cowardly act of digital terrorism, they are attempting to delegitimize the event because they cannot explain the failure. This has not notably changed the reality on the ground. That 1,500 centers are still dark and their security architecture is effectively a hollow shell. Think carefully about what this represents. When a state that prides itself on unmatched intelligence superiority is caught entirely off guard by an event that shuts down its entire command structure, that is not an anomaly. That is not a temporary technical error, that is a verdict. It is a verdict on the arrogance of a security doctrine that believed it could maintain eternal dominance through technological disparity. If you are a regular person trying to pay your bills, wondering why your local news is talking about everything except the stability of the regional infrastructure, this is why. The situation in Tel Aviv is not a distant abstract issue. It is a fundamental collapse of the architecture that was supposed to keep the region under a specific, enforced order. When that order fails, the ripple effects go everywhere, from energy prices to regional shipping and the cost of basic goods. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. Look at the Peloponnesian War. Athens was the dominant power, convinced of its own naval and intellectual supremacy. They spent years exhausting themselves in proxy conflicts, ignoring the rising strength of the periphery, and they believed their walls and their sophisticated intelligence networks would protect them from the inevitable reality of exhaustion. The parallel is exact. The current establishment in Tel Aviv is the Athens of the 21st century, entrenched in a belief that their digital walls are impenetrable, while they bleed resources into a conflict that is fundamentally unwinnable in the long term. They are ignoring the fact that the third party, the alliance they spent years trying to dismantle, has quietly and methodically built the tools to bring their house of cards down. The history of empires shows us that they rarely fall because of an external invasion. They fall because they stop being able to govern their own systems, and they wake up one day to find that their tools no longer work. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths, because there is no honest middle ground here, and you need to be prepared for the reality of what comes next. Path 1, the administration in Tel Aviv attempts to pivot to a purely kinetic, low-tech conflict to bypass their now useless digital grid. This would involve massive, uncoordinated, and likely ineffective operations that will only serve to further isolate them internationally and increase the cost of the conflict to an unsustainable level. The likelihood of this is high, but the success rate is near zero. Path 2, a total and humiliating admission of vulnerability, leading to a desperate request for Western intervention to restore their digital sovereignty. This would be a massive escalation, potentially dragging other powers into a conflict they have been trying to avoid for years. If this happens, we are talking about a fundamental shift in the global order, the consequences of which are impossible to fully predict. Path 3, and the one that I believe is becoming the most likely, is the gradual, painful recognition that the digital dominance they once enjoyed is gone, and they are forced to negotiate from a position of profound systemic weakness. This is the path that no one in the halls of power in the West wants to talk about, because it admits that the era of total control is over. I think we are closer to Path 3 than the headlines suggest. The reason is simple. You cannot fix a system that has been compromised to its core without essentially rebuilding it from scratch, and in the current climate, they do not have the time, the budget, or the social stability to do that. But be aware, the transition from Path 1 to Path 3 will be volatile. Here are the questions I want you to take away. Why were there no early warning signs? If 1,500 centers can be disabled in 45 minutes, what else is already compromised? And most importantly, who is actually in control of the regional narrative right now? Tell me in the comments what you think the administration does next. Do they pivot, do they ask for help, or do they retreat? Tell me if you think this event marks the end of their regional dominance. We will keep tracking every development in these intelligence systems and the shifting power dynamics of the Levant. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand why the headlines don't match the reality. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, because if you are watching this, you know we are only just beginning to see the full picture of what has happened. We will see you in the next analysis.